notwithstanding your statements under oath here today that Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was afforded due process, he was in fact not afforded due process, because then if he were, you would have seen the withholding order that did not permit him to be deported to El Salvador. Now you allege, and I guess the Attorney General alleges, that he's a member of MS-13. That may very well be the case. And if he is, now that is a foreign terrorist organization, certainly the immigration laws would allow him, and in fact require him, to be deported. I certainly would support that. But the problem that we have here is what you allege, what Ms. Green alleges, what the Attorney General alleges, is not the judiciary. You don't get to decide whether or not he is an MS-13 member.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Liberty Watchtower, where truth takes center stage. Here, we keep you informed, engaged, and thinking critically in a world that often demands it. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe, and tap the notification bell to never miss a dose of real, unfiltered truth. Now, let's dive in. The integrity of our Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in the United States of America. Recently, in a hearing before Congress, we confronted an alarming situation involving the deportation of Mr. Abrego Garcia, also referred to as Kilmar Garcia. The Department of Homeland Security alleges that Mr. Garcia is a member of MS-13, a gang known for its brutal violence and criminal activity. If true, that is a serious matter. Let me be clear, I do not defend gang members or violent criminals. I defend the Constitution, which includes the constitutional requirement that everyone, no matter how serious the accusation, is entitled to due process under the law.
I now recognize Mr. Goldman for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go back to Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, Madam Secretary. But my first question for you is a pretty simple one. It's basic civics. Which branch of government does the Constitution give the authority to interpret what the law is, the judiciary or the executive branch?
Sir, going forward, the interpretation of the law, you make the laws in this body. The judicial branch makes sure that they have integrity and they're applied properly to individuals.
So I'm just going to take that as the judiciary branch. Now, let's focus for a second on what the judiciary branch has said about this case. We know the Supreme Court has said 9-0 that, notwithstanding your statements under oath here today that Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was afforded due process, he was in fact not afforded due process, because then if he were, you would have seen the withholding order that did not permit him to be deported to El Salvador. Now you allege, and I guess the Attorney General alleges, that he's a member of MS-13. That may very well be the case. And if he is, now that is a foreign terrorist organization, certainly the immigration laws would allow him, and in fact require him, to be deported. I certainly would support that. But the problem that we have here is what you allege, what Ms. Green alleges, what the Attorney General alleges, is not the judiciary. You don't get to decide whether or not he is an MS-13 member. And you don't have to take my word for it, because Judge Wilkinson, a Fourth Circuit judge, very conservative, addressed this argument. He said, the government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident in its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Will you commit right now to give Mr. Abrego Garcia that process where you can prove your allegation that he is a member of MS-13?
Congressman, that judge that you just quoted did not say he was not a member of MS-13. Who did say that he was a member of MS-13 was law enforcement officers that encountered this individual.
Yeah, he knows
We
that.
had
This is a Fourth Circuit judge. He knows all of what the evidence is, and he's saying if that evidence. So you're not going to commit
Before he was deported,
follow this
sir,
order. You won't
that
commit to
said he
follow
was
this court order.
MS-13. By the way, he identified
Madam Secretary,
himself.
I
Was
reclaim my
surrounded.
time. Stop
He was
filibustering.
surrounded. He
Stop
was
filibustering.
surrounded by gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately,
So he,
sir, and he is not.
how can
in
you
this
say he's
country
been
anymore.
treated
For
appropriately
advocacy,
if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately. Why is your opinion better
we had
and
two
have more authority than the Supreme Court?
investigators, 2 judges, an immigration court that all said he was MS-13 and was removed from this country.
But you understand, that is you saying that. That is you saying that.
That is them saying that. This
No,
is
no, no, no.
investigators and law
That is
enforcement
you
officers
making
in
that
the case they
determination.
built against him. If you don't
The
trust our law
court
enforcement
has
officers
considered all that.
and
The judge has
investigators,
considered all that,
then
Madam
who do you
Secretary.
trust if you
And
don't
if you would be
trust
quiet
judges?
because I'm reclaiming my time, you are not following this court order.
Our Constitution is not ambiguous about this. It divides powers deliberately and carefully. Congress writes the laws. The executive branch enforces them, and the judiciary interprets them. That structure exists to prevent tyranny, to ensure that no one branch of government acts as judge, jury, and executioner. And yet, in Mr. Garcia's case, it appears that is precisely what has happened. The Supreme Court of the United States, our highest court, ruled unanimously, 9-0, that Mr. Garcia was not afforded due process. Let that sink in. Not a split decision, not 5-4. Unanimous. The court determined that a withholding of removal order, which should have protected Mr. Garcia from being deported, was disregarded. In effect, the executive branch acted unilaterally, without proper legal procedure, and against a court order. In questioning the Secretary of Homeland Security, I asked a simple but fundamental question: which branch of government has the authority to interpret the law? She eventually acknowledged it was the judiciary, but her department's actions tell a different story. Instead of following the courts, DHS made its determination based on internal assessments and law enforcement claims, and proceeded to deport Mr. Garcia. No hearing, no legal review, no due process. Judge Wilkinson of the Fourth Circuit, a respected and conservative jurist, underscored this point, writing that perhaps Mr. Garcia is a terrorist. Perhaps not, but he is still entitled to due process. That's the bedrock of American justice. We do not take away people's rights based on what we suspect. We follow the law. Let me be clear again. This is not about protecting a gang member. It's about protecting the rule of law. If we allow the government to ignore due process because someone is accused of something terrible, then what's to stop it from doing the same to anyone? To citizens? To you? Due process is not a courtesy. It is not optional. It is a constitutional mandate. This case should alarm every American, regardless of political party. Because when the executive branch chooses to ignore the courts, when it acts as though it is above judicial review, it is not just undermining one man's rights, it is undermining all of ours. In this chamber, in this country, no one is above the law. Not the accused, not the secretary, not even the president. That is the promise of the Constitution. That is what we are here to defend. And that is what I intend to uphold today and always.
But let's focus on the court order, because this opinion also says that to facilitate, which the Supreme Court is requiring, is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to allow him to get due process?
Abrego Garcia is in his home country.
What
If he were to come
steps
back,
have
your
you
advocacy-
taken?
If your continued advocacy for him were to...
I'm not advocating for him.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
advocating for a
Absolutely.
court order, Madam
Gone to the
Secretary.
mat for this
The
man.
court order
He's terrorizing
says
people
that
in
you
traffic
must take
and human
steps
beings.
to follow the court order. You are here under oath. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia pursuant to this court order?
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process.
Constituents as
And that's under the Constitution.
Gentleman's
and you
time
should
has
fight too for
expired.
due process.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize